Ever feel like some of those classic religious stories leave you with more questions than answers?
Oh, yeah.
Well, today we're diving into one of those.
Okay.
The story of Adam and Eve,
All right.
but not in the way you might expect.
Okay.
We're going to explore the deeper symbolic meaning, according to Abdu'l-Bahá's writings,
Interesting.
in some answered questions.
Ah, okay.
Get ready for some aha moments, because we're going beyond the literal here.
I like it.
So let's face it.
Yeah.
The literal interpretation of Adam and Eve has some, quirks. Talking snake, anyone.
Yeah. I know what you mean.
Even Abdu'l-Bahá acknowledges that taking it literally raises some eyebrows.
He does.
He points out that if we accept the story as purely historical,
Okay.
it would indeed be exceedingly strange.
Makes sense.
Which is precisely why he encourages us to understand it as a metaphor
for
the human experience.
Interesting. So how does that work?
Well, he suggests that Adam represents the spirit of humankind.
Okay.
You know, that pure divine essence we all share.
I see.
So Adam is like the blueprint for humanity.
Okay.
Spiritual core.
All right, I got it. What about Eve then?
Where does she fit into this symbolic picture?
Well, Eve represents the self.
The self.
Yeah. Our individual egos.
Okay.
Our desires. Our very human inclination towards the material world.
Oh, I see.
You can think of it as that part of us that's constantly focused on like me, mine, what I want.
Okay.
So it's not about a literal man and woman.
Right.
But about these two forces.
Okay.
The spirit and the self.
Yeah.
Constantly interacting.
Interesting. And that sets the stage for understanding the other symbols.
Okay.
Like the Garden of Eden.
Yes. Paradise Lost, right?
Exactly.
So how do we understand that symbolically?
Well, think of the Garden of Eden as representing the spiritual realm.
Okay.
A place of pure goodness, light, and unity with the divine.
Makes sense.
It's the ultimate state of spiritual harmony.
Sounds idyllic.
But then we have the tree of good and evil.
Right. Is that like the ultimate buzzkill in paradise?
It's important to remember that Abdu'l-Bahá isn't saying that the material world is bad.
Okay.
The tree of good and evil represents the material world.
Right.
A place where both light and darkness, good and bad, exist together.
I see.
It's a realm of duality.
Okay.
Where choices have consequences.
So the tree itself isn't the problem.
Right.
It's more about how we navigate the choices presented in this material world.
You got it. And then, of course,
What's next?
There's that serpent.
Ah, right.
The ultimate symbol of temptation.
And not just about a literal snake in this context, I'm guessing?
Not at all. Think of the serpent as representing those things that tempt us.
Okay.
Away from our spiritual connection and pull us towards worldly desires.
That makes sense. What would be a modern-day serpent then?
Well, imagine you're trying to focus on a meaningful project.
Okay.
Maybe something that really feeds your soul.
Yeah.
But then you get that familiar itch to check your phone.
Oh, I know exactly what you mean.
To scroll through social media.
Yeah.
To seek that quick hit of validation through likes and comments.
Yep.
That pull, that distraction.
Yeah.
That's the serpent whispering in your ear.
Wow. Okay, that's a really powerful image. So we've got Adam as the spirit.
Right.
Eve as the self. The garden as the spiritual realm.
Yep.
The tree as the material world.
And
the serpent as the voice of temptation.
Right.
How does all of this tie into the idea of the fall from grace?
That's where things get particularly interesting. Abdu'l-Bahá offers a perspective on the fall that challenges traditional interpretations.
Interesting.
He suggests it's not about a literal fruit or disobeying God.
Okay.
It's about the spirit
Okay.
becoming so attached to the material world through the desires of the self. So it's like each time I choose to stay up late scrolling through social media, instead of getting a good night's sleep, I'm essentially enacting a mini fall from grace.
Yes.
That choice in that moment is a microcosm of the Adam and Eve dynamic.
Okay, that makes sense.
It's about succumbing to those immediate desires, even when they pull us away from what truly nourishes our spirit.
I see. So the fall isn't a one-time event.
No.
but this ongoing process
exactly.
of getting caught up in the material world at the expense of our spiritual connection.
Precisely. But doesn't that make us inherently bad somehow?
Not at all. And that brings us to the concept of original sin.
Okay.
Again, Abdu'l-Bahá reframes this in a way that might surprise you.
Okay, I'm intrigued. How does he redefine original sin within this framework?
Oh, he says it's not about inheriting guilt from Adam and Eve's actions. It's about inheriting this tendency.
Okay.
This inclination towards prioritizing the material world over our spiritual growth.
So it's not about being punished for what someone else did thousands of years ago.
Right.
It's about recognizing that we're all born into a world where those material desires are a powerful force that can easily distract us from our true purpose.
Right. And it's a challenge we all face.
But if we're hardwired for this struggle, is there any hope for us? I mean, are we doomed to repeat this cycle of getting caught up in the material world?
Absolutely not. And that's where the concept of the tree of life comes in.
Okay.
It represents something incredibly powerful and hopeful.
Okay, I'm ready for some hope. Tell me more about this tree of life. Where does it fit into this whole symbolic landscape?
It represents the highest level of spiritual attainment.
So there's a way to break free from this cycle.
Exactly.
Of temptation and attachment.
Yeah.
To reconnect with our spiritual core. Even amidst the allure of the material world.
You got it. Think of it as that state of pure connection with the divine.
Okay.
Where we transcend the limitations of our ego and material desires.
So while the tree of good and evil represents the material world with its inherent duality, the tree of life points towards a realm of pure spiritual unity.
Precisely. And it's not just some abstract concept.
Right.
Abdu'l-Bahá points to divine messengers. Like Christ. As embodiments of the tree of life.
So those figures who seem to embody a higher level of spiritual awareness and connection.
Right. They come to guide humanity towards its true potential, to show us the way back to the garden, so to speak.
Right.
By demonstrating how to overcome that serpent of material attachment.
Which brings us to Christ's role in all of this.
Yeah.
If the fall isn't about disobedience and punishment, then what was Christ's sacrifice all about?
It wasn't about appeasing an angry God. It was about showing us the path to spiritual liberation, to break free from the chains of material desire.
So true freedom isn't about getting what we want in the material world. Right. It's about freeing ourselves from the illusion that those things will bring us lasting happiness.
Exactly.
So it's not about denying our desires, but about understanding their true nature, their limitations.
There's a beautiful quote
where
Christ says, "I gave my blood for the life of the world."
Okay, I've heard that one.
And Abdu'l-Bahá explains that this doesn't refer to physical life.
Okay.
It refers to spiritual liberation, to that state of being where we experience true lasting joy that transcends the ups and downs of the material world.
Okay, but if we're talking about the symbolic interpretation, where Adam and Eve aren't literal figures, how does that square with the traditional view that their sin affected all of humanity?
That's a question a lot of people grapple with.
Yeah.
And Abdu'l-Bahá addresses it head on.
Okay.
He points out that if we take the story literally, it raises serious questions about divine justice.
Right, like why would all of humanity be punished for something two people did?
Exactly.
Especially when you consider figures like Abraham, Moses, Noah. All those individuals considered righteous.
Right.
It just doesn't make sense that they'd be condemned for something completely out of their control.
And Abdu'l-Bahá agrees.
Okay.
He argues that a loving and just God wouldn't operate that way.
Okay, so how do we reconcile the symbolic interpretation with the idea that Adam and Eve's actions have consequences for us today?
Well, think about it this way. We're born into a world where material attachment is the dominant narrative.
Okay.
From a very young age, we're bombarded with messages equating happiness with material possessions.
Yeah, status and external validation.
So it's like we're conditioned to believe that those things are the keys to fulfillment.
It's less about punishment and more about recognizing the powerful influence of that initial choice, how it set the stage for a world where material attachment became the default mode of being.
I'm starting to see how this symbolic interpretation actually makes the story more relevant to our lives. It's not about blaming some distant ancestors. It's about acknowledging the forces we're up against, those internal and external pressures that pull us toward the material world.
But here's the crucial part.
Okay.
We're not powerless against these forces.
Okay, so there's hope.
Through spiritual practices like prayer and meditation.
Okay.
By striving to live in accordance with those higher spiritual principles, we can start to shift our focus. We can begin to prioritize our connection to that divine essence within us, even as we navigate.
The complexities of the material world.
So while we inherit this tendency toward material attachment, we also inherit the capacity to choose a different path. We have the power to reclaim our spiritual connection.
And this brings us back to the idea of free will. We're not simply victims of our circumstances or our inherited tendencies. We have the power to choose to turn away from the serpent's whisper and reach for the branches of the tree of life.
It's like, instead of viewing the Adam and Eve story as a cautionary tale about disobedience, we can see it as a story about our own potential for spiritual transformation.
And it underscores the importance of understanding these stories through a symbolic lens. When we move beyond the literal, we unlock deeper meaning that can illuminate our own lives.
I'm also curious about something mentioned earlier.
Okay, what's that?
That Adam's sin was relative to his station. What did you mean by that?
Abdu'l-Bahá explains that while attachment to the material world had significant consequences for Adam, it's considered a sin only in relation to his potential for spiritual connection.
So it's not that those material desires are inherently evil. It's just that they pale in comparison to the joy and fulfillment that come from cultivating our spiritual connection.
It's like comparing a flickering candle to the radiance of the sun.
Okay, I like that.
The candle might provide some light.
Yeah.
But it's nothing compared to the power and brilliance of the sun.
I love that analogy. It really captures the difference in magnitude between those two states of being.
And Abdu'l-Bahá takes it even further.
Okay, even further how?
He says that material life, in comparison to eternal existence, the life of the kingdom is like death.
Whoa. That's a pretty stark contrast.
Yeah.
But I can see what he's getting at if we're solely focused on the material world. If that's our only frame of reference, then we're missing out on the true essence of life. We're essentially living a limited existence when a realm of infinite possibility awaits.
It's like we're living in a black and white world. When a whole spectrum of color exists. And it's not that the black and white world is bad. It's just a fraction of the full picture.
This reminds me of that quote where Christ says,
which one?
Let the dead bury their dead.
He
wasn't talking about physical death, right? He was talking about those who are spiritually dead. So preoccupied with the material world that they've lost sight of their true nature.
Exactly. Christ recognized that true life, true aliveness is found in the spiritual realm, in that connection with the divine that transcends the limitations of our physical existence.
This is all so mind-blowing. It's amazing how a story as old as Adam and Eve can still hold such profound meaning for us today.
And that's the beauty of these ancient texts. They contain layers upon layers of wisdom waiting to be unpacked.
It's like Abdu'l-Bahá is giving us a key to unlock that hidden wisdom, inviting us to view this familiar story through a new lens. And in doing so, he's revealing a profound message about our own spiritual journey.
It's a message that transcends time and culture. It speaks to that universal longing within each of us. To connect with something greater than ourselves. To experience true freedom and lasting fulfillment.
And it leaves us with some big questions to consider.
It does.
If we're not doomed to repeat the mistakes of Adam and Eve,
Right.
if we have the power to choose a different path, then what does that look like in our everyday lives?
Yeah, that's the question, isn't it?
How do we practically apply these insights to navigate the challenges of the modern world? So we're not living in the Garden of Eden.
Right.
We don't have a talking snake to blame. Yeah. And most of us aren't encountering divine messengers on a daily basis.
Right.
How do we actually apply these symbolic interpretations?
That's a great question.
To our modern everyday lives?
I think it starts with recognizing the modern day serpents in our own lives.
All right, so we need to identify those things that subtly tempt us away from our spiritual center.
What might those serpents look like today?
Exactly.
Well, think about the things that pull you off, Courtney.
Yeah, okay.
The things that whisper, indulge just a little more.
Oh, yeah.
Or worry about this a little longer.
So those serpents could be anything from excessive materialism to the constant need for validation on social media.
It could also be clinging to unhealthy relationships or negative thought patterns.
Makes sense.
Anything that keeps us fixated on the self and its desires, trapping us in those cycles of wanting and striving.
But recognizing those serpents is just the first step. Right.
What do we do once we've identified?
Once we see those serpents for what they are,
Yeah.
we can start to loosen their grip.
Okay, how?
This is where those spiritual practices we talked about come in.
Prayer, meditation.
Exactly.
Service to others.
Anything that helps us shift our focus from the self to something larger.
So it's not about becoming hermits.
Right.
And rejecting the material world altogether.
That's a great way to put it.
It's about finding a healthier relationship with it.
It's about remembering that we are spiritual beings, having a human experience. And if we want to experience true happiness and fulfillment, we need to nurture that spiritual connection.
I have to admit, this whole conversation has been a major mind shift for me.
Really?
I always saw the story of Adam and Eve as this cautionary tale about disobedience and punishment.
I see.
But understanding it as a symbol for the human experience. Well, that's so much more empowering. It takes the focus off of guilt and shame.
Right.
And puts it on growth and transformation.
So ultimately, the tree of life represents that state of spiritual enlightenment, that connection with the divine that we're all capable of experiencing.
And the journey to the tree of life isn't about achieving some perfect state of being.
Right.
It's about those small daily choices we make
to
nourish our spirit,
Right.
to feed our connection to something larger than ourselves.
So even when those serpents inevitably show up,
Right.
we can choose to walk a different path.
Exactly.
A path that leads us back towards that spiritual liberation that Christ exemplified.
Beautifully said. It's about recognizing those moments of choice. And remembering that we have the power to redirect our energy, to turn away from the serpent's whisper and reach for something higher.
You know, it strikes me that this symbolic interpretation is so much more hopeful than the traditional take.
I agree.
On the Adam and Eve story, it's not about falling from grace.
Right.
It's about the ongoing journey of rising to our spiritual potential.
What's inspiring about this interpretation is that it acknowledges the challenges we face while also emphasizing our capacity for growth and transformation.
It's like we all have this inner compass pointing us towards the tree of life.
Sometimes we get distracted, we wander off course.
Right.
But we always have the ability to reorient ourselves and find our way back.
And maybe the most important takeaway is that we're not alone in this.
Right.
We have the wisdom of those who have walked this path before us.
Yeah.
We have the support of spiritual communities.
Exactly.
And we have the power of our own choices to guide us.
So to our listeners out there, we leave you with this.
What are the serpents in your own life?
Right. What are the attachments that might be holding you back from experiencing true spiritual freedom?
And what small step can you take today, even in this moment, to begin moving toward the tree of life?
Remember, the path might be challenging.
Yeah.
But the rewards, the sense of peace and purpose that comes from nurturing that connection to the divine are immeasurable.